Today, we're tackling something incredibly tough, a really tragic event out of Charlotte, North Carolina. It's shaken things up and sparked some major public conversations about safety and about justice. We'll be focusing this deep dive on the truly heartbreaking story of Iryna Zarutska. She was a young refugee, and she experienced just horrific violence on public transit there. Her death has really turned up the heat on questions about our justice system, public safety. It's complicated, sensitive stuff. Our job here, as always, is to pull out the key pieces of knowledge, the insights from the sources you shared, so you can understand the layers here. It's not just what happened, but why it's become such a flashpoint for looking at the whole system.
Exactly. And, sometimes one single devastating event like this acts like an X-ray, really. It shows you the systemic issues that might be lurking just beneath the surface. It's so striking here, I think, is how this tragedy gets right to the heart of a major tension in public safety today. How do we balance individual liberty, the need for that, with our collective right to feel safe, especially when you look at the data, the system's own data on repeat offenders. It just raises hard questions. So, yeah, our goal is to unpack those elements, connect the personal heartbreak to the wider societal echoes, help everyone grasp why this specific event is getting so much attention.
Okay, let's start with the human story at the center of this. Iryna Zarutska. She was just 23 years old, a Ukrainian refugee. She'd, like so many others, sought safety here, away from the unimaginable horror of war back home. Escaped Ukraine in 2022, looking for a fresh start, a place to feel secure. And then, August 22nd, 2025, in Charlotte. Her search for safety just ends, tragically, shockingly. She was stabbed to death, brutally. On the Lynx blue line, Charlotte's light rail, a public space she was likely using just to, live her new life. She flees war, only to face this kind of senseless violence in what should have been a place of refuge. It's just, the irony is almost unbearable.
It really is devastating. And it taps into that fundamental human need, that desire we all have for safety, for security, especially for someone who's already been through so much trauma. Iryna's journey, it represented hope, didn't it? Finding peace. And that hope was just extinguished so cruelly.
Yeah.
And what makes this resonate even more publicly, I think, is where it happened, on the Lynx blue line rail, a shared public space. And it was caught on surveillance cameras. Right. So this wasn't something hidden away. It's visibility happening right there on public infrastructure, which we expect to have, security measures. It just amplifies that sense of violation. It forces a very public conversation about urban safety. The fact that there's footage means the horror isn't just described, it's recorded in some way. For the public, that can make it feel much more immediate, visceral even.
Yeah, I could see that.
It reinforces that awful thought. This could happen anywhere, to anyone, especially in spaces we use every single day. It forces a community and its leaders to face up to the realities of public safety, very tangible realities. And that often leads straight to calls for accountability, for reform.
And that accountability naturally brings us to the person accused in this case, DeCarlos Brown Jr. He's 34. And what's really alarming here, a huge focus of the discussion, is his criminal history. It's expensive. Our sources say Brown had, get this, 14 prior arrests. Yeah. And these aren't minor things.
Yeah.
His record includes serious offenses. Armed robbery, notably. That history is, it's stark. When you see a record like that, 14 arrests, armed robbery included, what questions does that immediately bring up about how the justice system is meant to protect the public?
Yeah.
How does that history feed into this whole debate?
Well, this is exactly where it stops being just about one crime and starts being about the system itself, right? Brown's history, 14 priors, violent felonies like armed robbery. It immediately puts a spotlight on things like pretrial release policies. And on the broader ways we try to identify and manage risk, you have to ask, were the safeguards in the system enough at various points? Were the risk assessments good enough? Were there gaps, maybe in oversight or case management, that let someone with such a consistent pattern of serious crime back into the community?
Right. Those are the tough questions being asked.
Yeah. Now, on the immediate legal side of things, Brown was arrested very quickly after the stabbing. And he's facing federal charges, which is significant.
Okay, federal. Why federal?
It likely relates to where the crime happened on public transit, the Lynx blue line, which often involves federal funding. Or it could potentially relate to federal laws concerning the victim's status as a refugee. Either way, it kicks it up from a typical state prosecution, brings the full power of federal law into play, and yes, that could potentially mean life imprisonment or even the death penalty.
So there's that immediate legal track.
Right. It provides a certain immediate closure on his legal status for now, but it absolutely doesn't quiet those bigger systemic questions his history has brought right to the surface.
Exactly. And those systemic questions, really fueled by this awful incident, they spread out into this wider public debate, exposing what many are calling serious flaws in two areas specifically. First, cashless bail policies. Second, public transit security. So for listeners who know these topics but want the core insights, what's really at the heart of these debates right now? Why are they getting so much focus?
Okay, let's break that down, starting with cashless bail. When we talk about that, we mean reforms where someone accused of a crime can be released before trial without putting up money, usually based on, say, a promise to come back to court or other non-financial conditions. The goal, often, is to make the system fairer, so someone isn't stuck in jail just because they're poor, right, and to reduce jail overcrowding.
Makes sense.
But the scrutiny that's flared up now after this tragedy, it's not just about release itself. It's about how well the risk assessment within those systems works, especially for people with long violent histories like Brown's. The public discussion, which we see reflected in the sources, often voices concern that maybe these policies, or how they're applied, might prioritize release over immediate public safety, particularly if the tools used to judge the risk of reoffending aren't seen as strong enough for serious, repeat violent offenders.
So the worry is about potential gaps for the most serious cases.
Precisely. This incident makes people ask, did the policy's good intention, reducing jail time for nonviolent folks, unintentionally create a loophole for someone deemed a high risk?
Okay, so it's about the nuances of risk assessment within that policy framework. That's a critical point.
Exactly. And that links directly to the second area, public transit security. This terrible event on the Lynx Blue Line just underscores how vulnerable these shared open access spaces can be.
Yeah.
Public transport is vital for so many people, but if you don't feel safe using it, well, its whole purpose is undermined, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And our sources show that the calls for reform within Charlotte's transit system are specific. They're immediate.
What kind of things are being proposed?
Well, they're not just vague concerns. We're seeing concrete ideas surface, like a push for more uniformed officers on the Lynx Blue Line trains and platforms, not just driving by, but a consistent, visible presence.
More present.
Yeah. And better real-time surveillance monitoring. Not just recording footage to look at later, but actively watching feeds to potentially trigger faster responses.
Active monitoring, got it.
And finally, clearer, quicker intervention protocols. Making sure security or police can actually step in fast when something happens, not just investigate after the fact. It shifts the focus from just reacting to actively trying to prevent or interrupt incidents, bolstering safety for commuters.
So these are tangible proposals aimed at making people feel safer and be safer on transit.
Exactly. Specific, actionable ideas.
These discussions, cashless bail, transit security, wherever you stand personally, they really highlight this core tension, don't they, between different important goals: reforming justice, ensuring public safety, protecting individual liberty. There aren't easy answers here. It forces you to really look hard at how individual actions, our policies, and community safety all interact. It's complex.
It's like holding up a stark mirror, isn't it? Incidents like this make us, as a society, face the sometimes uncomfortable results of our policy choices, their real-world impact. Especially when you're trying to balance something like rehabilitation with the basic human right to feel safe. And that's why digging into the source material like this is so important. It gives you the context, the arguments being made, the specific changes being called for. It helps us all understand the landscape of these really critical debates.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's abundantly clear. The tragedy of Iryna Zarutska, 23 years old, Ukrainian refugee, escaped war only to be killed so senselessly on a Charlotte train it struck a deep chord. Far beyond the initial shock, we've gone through the heartbreaking details, the disturbing history of the accused, DeCarlos Brown Jr., and crucially, how this one awful event has kind of peeled back the layers. It's exposed these significant, specific questions about public safety measures, about justice system policies, not just in Charlotte, but really in any community facing similar challenges.
Yeah.
This terrible loss has become a catalyst. It's forcing a hard look at how our systems are working, or maybe, in some instances, how they might be failing to protect everyone in our society. It's just a powerful reminder of that link between individual tragedy and these larger ongoing debates about safety and justice.
Absolutely. These incidents, as painful and difficult as they are, they really do serve as vital triggers, catalysts for examining the very systems we rely on for protection. They push communities to look inward, to really scrutinize their policies, and to have those tough, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about what needs to improve. It shows that public safety isn't some fixed thing, right? It needs constant checking, a constant adaptation, especially when faced with new challenges and, well, heartbreaking realities like this one.
A constant process.
Yes. And perhaps this leaves us all with a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener, to reflect on. How do communities effectively balance compassion and justice, particularly thinking about reforms like cashless bail, with that absolute imperative to ensure every single person, especially someone seeking refuge, seeking a new start, can live without fear in our shared public spaces? It's a question that goes right to the core of our collective responsibility, I think, and it really challenges us to think deeply about the kind of society we want to build and maintain.
That is a powerful question to leave us with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive, exploring such a critical and very complex topic today. We hope this discussion has given you some valuable insights and plenty to think about as these vital conversations continue. We'll see you next time.